Hello, my pretties. What's up? It's the Lion Queen here. Welcome to episode 254 of Shadows and Pretties. And today in this episode, instead of doing a Muppet movie or anything like that, because I covered most of them, but although I do have intentions of covering the other ones in the future, I am today going to be reviewing a movie that was based on a book by Stephen King. Now, today we are going to take a look at the 1999 movie called The Greenmile. Yep, Stephen King wrote the book, The Greenmile, and this movie was actually pretty depressing. And of course, it is a very depressing, movie, but at the same time, it does have ups and downs, but it does hold a special place in my heart for a lot of actors like Michael Clark Duncan, who plays as John Coffey, who happens to be thrown in prison, which I will get to in a bit. So, most of you guys who have seen the movie The Green Mile, I mean, if you're a Stephen King fan like myself, then yeah, this movie stars Tom Hanks, who is one of the police officer in the movie. You should know that Tom Hanks is he voices Woody in Toy Story, which most of you guys know who Tom Hanks is. When I bring up Tom Hanks, most of us think of him as Woody from Toy Story because that was the character that he voices in the Toy Story movies. So, anyways, I guess we should begin with this review. So, before I get started, I want to say I will be spoiling the movie. So, it is based on the the 1996 novel by Stephen King. So, of course, with that being said, the movie I'm going to say right now is pretty much depressing. So, for those who haven't seen the movie, probably will know that the movie is depressing. I am not going to lie, it is pretty depressing, especially the ending. But at the same time, for most of us who have seen the movie, or for those who have read the book, but like I said, though, I definitely gotta say right now, I really like the fact that Tom Hanks was in this movie. I really do like the movie as well, although it does have depressing parts, which I will be revealing as we go. So, I guess with that being said, we should probably get started with the movie. So, all right. So, like I said, some of you guys probably haven't seen this movie in ages, and some of you guys probably need, a refresher, and some of you guys have not seen the movie. So, basically, the plot is about it's a takes place in Louisiana, an assisted living home in 1999. Retiree Paul Edgecombe becomes emotional while viewing the film Top Hat. His companion Elaine becomes concerned, and Paul explains to her that the film reminded him of the events he had witnessed while he was an officer at Cold Mountain Penitentiary's death row, nicknamed the Green Mile. So, in 1935, Paul supervised corrections officers Brutus, or Brutal Howell, Dean Stanton, and Harry Tilwiger, uh, Williger, I think that's how I pronounce it, and Percy Wetmore, reporting to Warden Hal Moores. Percy, the nephew of the state governor's wife, demonstrates his sadistic streaks, but flaunts his family connections to avoid being held accountable. So he is practically abusive towards the prisoner Edward Delacroix for killing his pet mouse, Mr. Jingles. So Paul is introduced to John Coffey, who is a physically imposing but mild mannered black man sentenced to death after being convicted of murdering two white girls and violating them. It's pretty messed up. So he joins Dell and the other comrades convict Aaron Bitterbuck, who is the first to be executed. So the officers are forced to deal with the psychotic new inmate, William or Wild Bill Warthond, who frequently causes trouble by assaulting the officers, practically abusing John, forcing them to restrain him in the block's padded cell from no more than one occasion. So after John heals Paul's severe bladder infection by touching him, and later resurrects Mr. Jingles, Paul gradually realizes that John possessed a supernatural ability to heal others. Although Paul doubts whatever someone in the power had performed divine miracles is truly guilty of the crime. In exchange for resigning the penitentiary and accepting a job at the insane asylum, Percy, however, is allowed to oversee Dell's execution. And at the execution, Percy deliberately avoids soaking the sponge used to connect electricity to Dell's head, leading Dell to suffering a gruesome, agonizing death, with John forced to feel some of Dell's pain as well. So Paul and the other officers punish Percy by forcing him to spend a night at the padded cell, while Percy's locked away. They secretly smuggle John out of the prison so that he can use his powers to heal Warden Moore's wife, Melena, for a brain tumor. He saves her life, but after Percy's released from the padded cell room, the others threaten to report him for his various actions for misconduct of his behavior continues. So John uses his power to release Melena's affection into Percy's brain, causing Percy to shoot Wild Bill to death. Soon after, John reveals the vision to Paul that Wild Bill was the true culprit of the crimes to which he was wrongfully condemned, releasing the supernatural energy into Paul in the process. After having to suffer a mental breakdown, Percy is committed to the same asylum where he had planned to work after reassigning from the prison. So after realizing that John is innocent, Paul is distraught from the thought of executing him and the others to let him go free. So John tells Paul that the executioner would be an act of mercy, and he views the world as a cruel place and the consistent pain of the suffering that people inflict upon each other. So, mentioning that he has never seen the movie before, John watches Top Hat while the other officers at his last request. As John is taken to be executed, he is mercilessly scorned by the people in the attendance who still suspect him of his convictions. He then asks not to have a hood placed over his head as he is afraid of the dark, and the officers watch in sadness, visibly holding back tears as John Coffey gets executed. But back in the present, Paul's telling Elaine that John's execution was the last that he and Brutal ever witnessed, as they both subsequently resigned from the prison and took jobs in the juvenile system. So Paul reveals to Eleni that Mr. Jingles is still alive, having to be blessed with a supernaturally long life thanks to John's healing touch. He also reveals that he's now 108 years old, while Elaine sees Paul's long life as another of John's miracles. Paul speculates that he may have been condemned to linger on the earth and outlive all of his loved ones in divine punishment for executing John. Paul is later shown attending Elaine's funeral and muses on how much longer he has left to live. Thus, the movie ends. Now, this is a pretty good movie because this one has Tom Hanks in it, because we all know Tom Hanks, he's famous for a lot of movies. And Michael Clark Duncan, who's playing as John Coffey in this movie, he did a pretty good job playing the character, although he had suffered a heart attack in 2012, the day after my dad's birthday that year. So, he would have been in his 60s by now. Michael Clark Duncan, he would have been in his 60s by now, because this movie was a pretty good movie. And I really have to say, I really found this movie to be depressing, especially partway through the film. I mean, I was honestly, depressed about the movie at, the last part where, John Coffey gets executed. Yeah, you understand why that now when I review this movie in this episode of Shadows and Pretties, that this is one of the most depressing movies I've ever seen. But I've seen other depressing movies, but this one's definitely one of the depressing ones I've ever seen. Tom Hanks did a pretty good job with, the characters, and especially, the fact that Tom Hanks was in this movie. I mean, the casting of Hanks and Darabont met at the Academy Award, and Stephen King stated that he envisioned Hanks in the role, that he was happy when Darabont mentioned his name. Hanks was originally supposed to play the elderly Paul Edgecombe as well, but the makeup test did not make him look credible enough to be an elderly man. Because of this, Gere was then hired to play as the older Edgecombe on his final film role, when John Travolta was offered the role of Paul Edgecombe, but unfortunately he turned it down. Thus, we have, Tom Hanks, who did the movie. So Duncan credited his casting to Bruce Willis, who pretty much had worked on the film Armageddon 1 year earlier. According to Duncan, Willis was first introduced to Darabont after hearing the open cell for John Coffey. The basketball player, though, with Shine Squill O'Neal, was offered the role of John Coffey but turned it down. So Josh Brolin was considered for the film role of William, or Wild Bill Wharton. Of course, the film itself is pretty good, and it was depressing, but I'm not gonna lie, this was an awesome movie. I really liked it. I mean, it's depressing, yes, but it still holds a really good heart and a good part in the movie that really gets me. I mean, it's emotional at parts, especially it gets depressing, especially, the ending of it. I mean, it's just depressing, but in all due reality, I honestly really liked it as when I was younger. I personally really thought this one was, a really good film for what it is. I mean, in all due reality, I mean, for those who haven't seen the movie in a really long time, I really highly recommend rewatching this movie. But just to warn you, if you're going to rewatch this movie and you don't remember it being this depressing, you're going to have to get ready because it is depressing, saying, especially at the ending. And for those who haven't seen it, you better get your tissues ready because, well, yeah. So, but with that being said, I really do thought that this was a pretty awesome movie for what it is. Although I will have to say, for its own self, that it is still depressing, but I do really have to say it's still a pretty awesome film for what it is. But, I mean, it's really a great story. I mean, the story that Stephen King did was awesome. I mean, I know he's done other ones like Misery, It, and etc. But this is definitely one film that I really consider it to be is, one of the most depressing films I've ever seen. But I still find it to be pretty good in my honest eyes. So, anyways, with that being said, and that being the case, I personally like this film. I personally think it's a great movie. And for those who haven't seen it, I recommend you check this movie out. You will not be disappointed. If you're a Stephen King fan like myself, I highly recommend you check this movie out. And if you're a Tom Hanks fan like myself, I highly recommend you watch this movie with Tom Hanks because most people will think of Woody from Toy Story every time Tom Hanks is mentioned, or the man from Castaway because yeah, Tom Hanks was in Castaway as well. So, anyways, with that being said, and that being the case, I recommend you check out this movie if you haven't. It's a pretty good movie. You will not be disappointed. While I can say, yes, it is depressing, I still find this movie was enjoyable. Now, I did rewatch this movie, and I remember watching it for the first time. I realized how depressing it was. But it's still a very fun movie, and I still recommend it for any of you guys who are looking into, trying to find a good movie. I highly recommend watching this one. Anyways, I guess with that being said, and that being the case, yeah, what did you guys personally think of this movie? Do you like the movie of the Greenmile? Do you like the book by Stephen King? Feel free to let me know in the comments below because I personally would like to hear what you all think. Now, as always, I'm the Lion Queen. I want to thank you so much for watching today's video, and if you're new to my channel, feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Ring the bell for notifications to when I upload, so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, I'll be seeing you all in the next video. Peace out. And before I go, I will say right now, I will review more of the Stephen King movies that are based on the books. I will be trying to find the time to do those in the near future. So you can promise me that I will be getting to those. So, anyways, I'll be seeing you all in the next video. Peace out. And like always, I'll see you all next time.